Welcome to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I am your host, Tara Accardo, and I am so excited about today's guest. This has been a hot minute coming, so I am super excited to introduce you to Kate Anderson. She is the founder of Welkin Memorials, and we're just going to have a really beautiful conversation today. I'm super excited for you guys to get to know her a little bit better and her story and how Welcome came to be. So welcome, Kate, to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just to kick this off, of course, I just was hoping you could tell everyone a little bit about who you are, any fun facts too outside of your loss, because we are so much more than what we've lost, of course, but it's obviously very much impacted our lives. So whatever you feel like sharing.
Yeah. So I'm Kate, founder of Welkin Memorials. I'm originally from Arizona, but I currently live in New York City. I've spent my career in marketing, specifically in direct-to-consumer brands. And a few fun facts about me are that I used to skydive solo. My mom and I have the same birthday, and I've lived in Hawaii.
Oh my God. Okay, really quick. Where in Hawaii?
I lived on Oahu.
Oh, Oahu. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. My husband and I are going there for the very first time in August. It's like now June of 2023. So we're going there in a couple months. And I'm so excited.
Amazing. That's so great. What island
So
are you going to?
beautiful. Maui.
Nice.
Yeah,
Gorgeous.
yeah. So excited. So tell us a little bit about your journey of loss and grief. This is really, I mentioned a little bit of this in our intro, but this is really how you and I kind of came to find each other through the Instagram gods, that be, but also just our stories. We just really connected over this, and you have definitely seen your share of grief and loss as well. So whatever you're comfortable sharing, just so people can kind of get to know your story.
Yeah. So my story of loss and grief is really the founding story of Welkin. So I figured I would share that, but it's also really why I was drawn to you is because Welkin is essentially my gain following my loss.
Yes.
Um, yeah. And so my dad passed away suddenly a week before my 22nd birthday, and I was left as the next of kin to navigate the world of funeral planning on my own. And I wanted to create a celebration of life, preferably outdoors, and find an urn that reflected both my dad and my own aesthetic. But instead, I was upsold, nickel and dimed, and pressured into choosing the outdated options that they offered within the funeral home. And because of a too short timeline, the need to plan a funeral within a week or so of his passing, I was forced between, the traditional options. It wasn't outside, it was indoors. And the urn that I chose was like a metal urn that had like ducks etched across it.
Oh my gosh.
He was outdoorsy, but I don't know that that reflected either of our aesthetics.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to change that experience, but I didn't know exactly how quite yet. But I wanted essentially the future me's of the world to have a better experience. And so I kind of just sat on that. And then fast forward a couple of years, I was a product developer at a digitally native direct to consumer brand. And that's when it came to me. I was reading a book, and everyone always says to, start with what you know. And I knew product development and the direct to consumer space. So I was going to design an urn, one that I would want in my home to showcase, my dad's memory. And so I looked around my studio apartment at the time and figured what would I want it to look like that way it aligned with my aesthetic and my dad's memory, and be something that when I have guests over in my home, it's not necessarily like an eyesore. I wanted to be able to have my friends over for cocktails, family over for dinner, and it not be, this
Like there's
sad.
dad.
Yeah.
There's Urban.
Like the meet the Fokker scene. I really didn't want that to happen.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and so that's what brought me to founding Welkin. And I wanted to make the tough times even a little bit easier through our fast shipping and our flexible return, just in case you decide you don't like it, and unlimited warranty in case anything happens. So I think creating something through my grief allowed me to create a channel to memorialize him and celebrate my father. He was an entrepreneur himself and kind of
That's
made me
awesome.
want it at a young age. He had some small businesses, and he encouraged me to use my allowance money to save up and buy some gumball machines. And I put the gumball
That's
machines in
awesome.
his store, and he'd give me all the profits, but I had to count all the money and bring it to the bank and then save it. And then eventually I could buy another gumball machine and put it in and kind of, go that route. And so I think that That being said, he'd be incredibly proud of what I built, and like
Yeah.
that in and of itself brings me joy within the business. So it's my gain from the loss.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I mean, I knew some of this about your story, but there's so much in there that I like didn't know. So that's just like, it's so heartwarming and just, yeah, I mean, so you so clearly have the entrepreneurial spirit from him, but I can't imagine. I mean, so just like age wise, like when did you start doing all, because literally I'm 32 right now and I'm like, where do I start getting a product like
Yeah.
going? And so just like whatever you can talk about as far as like how like I don't know, we don't really talk about like business stuff here on the podcast, but like I'm very curious. I think other people would be too. Like, how did like Welkin come to fruition? And like, can you just talk a little bit about like getting the company off the ground and like what that has been like for you? And has there been any like struggles with that, or like, you know, whether you might have had some griefy moments during that, or just like moments where you're like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, it took multiple years to get it off the ground, mostly to do with COVID. I
Hmm.
started working on it in about 2018, so a couple of years following his passing.
Okay.
And like I said, I just read it out of the book. Like
Wow.
I read, to start with what you know, and then you can kind of build what you want from there. And so that's where it all started. And I remember texting my best friend who gave me the book and being like, "This is my idea. Like, what do I do?" And I created a Pinterest board. I mean, Pinterest was like
Love it.
massive back then, of like, different design aesthetics that I was inspired by and different brands. And I remember calling it Project You. Like I didn't have a name. I had no idea what I was doing. And it just, I made a commitment to myself to do one thing a day for the business, the non-existent business that I
Yeah.
wanted to create. And I just took that route because it was incredibly overwhelming. And even though I did
Yeah.
have experience, being a product designer and developer, I knew how to make, a drawing and source manufacturing and figure out the supply chain. I didn't know how to create an LLC and
Yeah.
all the other things like creating a Shopify account and all those things. So I really leaned on my community, which I think helped within that process as well. Because even though it was a couple of years down the line, you're still grieving, and doing this process was really um, eye opening, I would say, to
Yeah, I'm
the
sure.
grief I was still going through. Because you read a lot about it and you kind of dig into
Mhm.
it for yourself. But I think the personal stories that I receive now are really resonate with the why behind why I did it.
Mhm.
People similar to you had your
Yeah.
loved ones' remains for years without an urn, and I was in the same boat. And so I would just continue to think of that and kind of just took it day by day. And we didn't
Yeah.
end up launching until 2021, December of 2021. So I mean, it
Right.
took quite a long time to
Yeah.
get up and running.
Yeah.
And I think the hardest part now, after having gotten everything off the ground, is really raising brand awareness within the industry,
Mhm.
because people don't think to plan ahead and they don't want
Yeah.
to talk about it. But then that's when you're like confined to the traditional options and you're kept inside the box because you do have
Mhm.
a too short timeline. Whereas if you start to plan ahead and talk to your family members and hear what they what their wishes are and what your wishes are, then you can start to kind of pre-plan. And
Yeah.
we've written a blog about how choosing an urn is a gift for your loved one and for yourself, because you get to like
Absolutely.
be a part of that process and also alleviate one of the steps, because there
Yeah.
are a laundry list of to-dos when that.
Entirely too many. Yeah. I think it's so beautiful what you said. I mean, you were like talking about it in the context of your business as far as like day at a time, step at a time, just one thing. But I think that is so impactful. And I just like, if anybody walks away with anything today, like that is with business, with grief, I mean, with so many parts of our life, right? Like if there's anybody listening here that are in like the very early stages, and you're like, I can barely even get out of bed right now. Like I can barely, take my dog out. Like we've been there. Like, and I always want to like preface these conversations by saying that even though we've found some gains and we're doing okay, relatively speaking now, like first of all, don't always see the behind the scenes stuff, but also, it took a lot of days of just one step at a time. So I just think that's such a powerful message. And just the way that you've obviously embodied that is like amazing. The other question I had, because truly, like when I first saw these urns on the website, I was like, please give me all of them. But when you like unbox them and when you like put them in your house and whatever, I mean, I can't express like the quality that these urns have, and like truly the fact that like, and I'm not trying to poke fun, it's that like they literally look like a vase, like you would never know. And I just love that so much. And for anybody here who doesn't know my story, I won't go totally into it right now, but like I'm 3.5 years out from having lost both my mom and my dad. And they are still, or were still in the boxes that they came in, because I was like, I will not spend money on an urn I don't like. And I always felt guilty about that, by the way. Like, I don't know if you can relate to that, or if like anybody else, but like my dad and I certainly felt pressure immediately. And even when my dad was alive and we were picking one out for her, like, he was like, first of all, he was like beside himself, so he couldn't even choose anything anyway. But we were both like, oh, just what? And they were super expensive, and all the things that your core values are that you want to avoid having to
Yeah.
put on people. And so just to come back to the quality for a moment, like, how did you know immediately like you want to do ceramic? Did you have colors in mind? Like, did you kind of know that you wanted to be able to put greenery in them, which I also think is like so genius, and kind of like not only just makes the urn look beautiful, but like really keeps them alive, so to speak. Because, and I love that you can swap it all out. So I'm just curious, like, as far as the design goes, because truly, like, anyone listening, if you have not seen these urns yet, like, I'll put everything in the show notes, of course, but like, please go to her website and look at them, because it's like mind blowing that I don't know. I can't get over it, but
Well,
like, did
thank
you
you
always
so
kind
much.
of, yeah, I really mean all of this so from the bottom of my heart. But yeah, anyway, back to the design. Did you know that you kind of wanted it to look that way, or like what sort of sparked that inspiration?
I mean, it was during the time where everybody was really focusing on making things with a function and
Mm-hmm.
like aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
I worked for a mattress company, and we cared an awful lot about what the cover looked like, what the zipper experience was like, what the tag was like. And so I thought, and people were starting to care about knife sets and cutting boards and all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things that are the primary purpose is a function, but they're making it like an aesthetic
Like
design
really
as
pretty.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was something I, considered, and I thought about, okay, so how can I create something that can live in your everyday? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is something that you would want on your bookshelf? Um, Specifically, I don't know if you can see that bookshelf behind me. I don't have an urn
Mm-hmm.
up there at the moment, but like, I wanted something to be able to fit on that bookshelf, because that was like the only piece of furniture I really had in my studio.
Love it.
And like fit in with the rest.
Yeah.
So what was
Yeah.
something that could go on there? And I didn't want to just create a box and sell it as an urn.
Right.
I wanted to, have two separate compartments where you put the remains in one part and the other part functions as something else. And
Mm-hmm.
so I came across the idea of a vase. And I really liked that idea with being able to incorporate the florals, whether they're dried
Yeah.
or real, and the opportunity to switch them out seasonally, or, with how you're feeling at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And or even just like simply, I went to the farmers market last weekend, and they had this beautiful dried floral arrangement company there, and I was able to select out one of the dried floral arrangements and come home and switch out the florals in the urn. And like, I just think
Okay.
that there's something so beautiful about that.
Yeah.
And you can use it as a seasonal change, or to reflect your loved one, or to reflect your mood. And it makes it something that is an evergreen experience, and you can
Yes.
continue to use it over and over again. And also, it feels completely different. Like, without the
Mm,
dried florals in it, it feels like a very modern and sleek piece of ceramic.
absolutely.
But then with the florals, it really feels like a vase, and it's very welcoming, and it's a centerpiece on your table, and those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
that was really what I considered. And it was really important to me that the two components were separate, that I wasn't just, producing a vase and advertising it as an urn.
Or like yet another urn, or yet another. Yeah. It's like that kind of defeats the whole purpose. Like, there's enough of that out there. So like, what, how
Yeah.
can you differentiate? Yeah. The function is, that's so smart. And it's just, I think it's such an overlooked like aspect of this, I don't know, death industry, for lack of a better term. So I think that's so amazing. And I love the fact that it's so like, I'm not going to say customizable, but personalizable, if that's a word, based
Yeah.
on us or our loved one. And we can pay an homage to them however we're seeing fit. And, again, having two dead parents, I could always like really make my mom's hers and make my dad's his. And, but even outside of any of the greenery or florals or anything you put in there, like, yeah, just to echo your point, like they're so classic, so timeless, so elegant, and just literally can go in any space, which is just, I mean, what more do you want?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's amazing. So what have you enjoyed most about creating these urns and forming Welkin, or like, are there any moments that you are like especially proud of?
Yeah. I think I'm especially proud of what I've created when I receive, reviews or even just customers emailing me to tell me that they had that the Welkin urn is like what they've chose to put their loved one in, and they've
Yeah.
had that their remains for an exceptionally long time, and they've never found anything that felt like memorialized them in an appropriate way. And our urn changed that for them. I think those stories like really resonate with me the most.
Yeah.
And I just love to see personally how everyone, I call it like stylizing the urn. So whether you put the
Mhm.
florals in it, or like I've had some people drape jewelry over the neck of the vase of
Oh,
their
that's a
loved
good
one,
idea. Oh my
or
God.
place it with like some old vintage photos kind of around the urn.
Yeah.
Things like that I just think are super creative, and really why I got into producing Welkin urns to begin with.
Yeah.
And then another thing I'm really proud of is this year we've been focusing a lot on partnerships, so connecting with other brands within the space like yourself,
Hmm.
because that was another thing I really wanted to do. That it's not the business model, but I really wanted, whether someone went to my site or your site or another brand within the quote unquote death industry, um, that they had all the resources that they need, because
Yeah.
that's, I think, one of the hardest parts of going through um, this time is not knowing everything
Yeah.
that needs to be done and trying to navigate it like as it comes up, because oftentimes it's too late for a lot of the resources.
Yeah.
And so knowing, as soon as you can, everything that you need to do and the ways to do it. So that was really important to me, was creating the resources, so that way, wherever they go first, they have everything that they need. And even taking that as far as we've started writing blogs about, text to send your friend who's grieving, and
Yeah.
gifts to send your friend who's grieving, and different guides like that, florals to send, to someone's funeral or memorial service. So
Right.
things to be a resource, in addition to just selling a product.
Yeah, I think those are things that people like don't think about. And I love getting into that stuff, whether it's cringy or uncomfortable or just like topics that you don't hear enough. Like those are my favorites in this space, because that's like what so many of us struggle with, and so many people struggle in silence with it. And it's like, and people get uncomfortable talking about urns, but here we are, we're like having some semblance of fun with it. And like it doesn't have to be, I mean, listen, it is a sad thing, of course, but like that's the whole premise of losses become gains too. And like what you've created is like there can be some semblance of beauty that comes from it too. And these are all just these little ways that we can honor our loved ones. And there's no like right or wrong way to do it. And there's no, you know, like it knows no bounds. And an urn is a perfect example of that. And I think people are so, that is so personal. That is such a big deal. So when I'm sure when you get these like reviews, like that really means something to somebody. If they're like, this is like the quote unquote final resting place of my loved one, like, yeah, we don't have like a place to bury them, but like for anybody who, is going to a grave, to be able to visit them, like, this is just, I'm sitting in our living room wherever. So it is a big deal, but yeah, it's just such a beautiful way to commemorate their memory. So just to kind of bring it back to the grief and loss space for a moment, and a little bit back to your story, just in all of your years going through life without your dad, and or any other losses that you might have gone through, what is something about your journey with loss that you found to be maybe the most difficult, or like something you maybe like weren't warned enough about, and just like talk about a little bit about why that is?
Yeah. So I would say there are like two things that really stand out in my mind when I think about that. The first is what I kind of just talked about. I was shocked about how much there was to do.
Yeah.
Like you just don't think about it,
Right.
and nobody wants to think about it. But then when you are the next of kin, you have a laundry list of to-dos, and
Mhm.
like you mentioned earlier, a too short timeline. And
Yeah.
it just feels impossible to do everything that you need to do during your time of grief, and then you almost push your grief to the side, and then you do this, um, all the duties for everybody else, it feels like.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then once you do that, it's like, okay, now what? Like
Right.
now it feels so far gone that it's
Mhm.
hard to process your grief, and you've kind of started moving on to the day to day, but like it's still there. And so it's incredibly hard for that person to kind of navigate. So that I think is the hardest part in the beginning. And so that's why I think planning ahead is really important, and
Mhm.
leveraging, those resources that are out there now to help with end of life planning and things of
Yeah.
the sort,
Yeah.
to help, you know, yourself and your loved ones, whatever side you're on. And then I think now the most difficult thing is that n- so much time has passed, and there are still so many things that I wish I knew about my dad. Like,
Oh, that's a good one.
just
Yeah.
like the memories and the experiences, and as you grow up, like what was his
Mhm.
first, apartment like, and what was
Yeah.
his first real love, and things like that. Like,
Mhm.
I just want to know those answers. And
Yeah.
there are people creating those various platforms now, which I think is incredible. Like digital documentaries, and even those books
Mhm.
that you have your loved one fill out on a date, like once a year,
Yeah.
or every day for a year, um, to capture their like thoughts and their memories.
Mhm.
But I think that that's the hardest thing for me, is like I just always have like these random thoughts and random questions, like, oh, what was dad's favorite alcoholic beverage? Because we never really got to drink together.
Yeah.
And just like weird little quirks
Those
like that, I
things
think
you,
are
like,
just
don't
like,
think about. Yeah, or you don't think about until after they're gone, and then you're like, "Well, this is fucking great." Like,
yeah. And you just kind of think that
like
over time it will get easier. And like holistically, it does.
yeah.
Like every day you just take it day by day. But then there are those times where you're like, oh, I really wish I knew that. And I can't just like, shoot him a
Mhm.
text and be like, hey, I have this weird question.
Yeah.
But last year for Christmas, I had asked my mom to take all of our VHS tapes and convert them
You get
into
them
like a
digitized. I did
digitized.
that too. It was the smartest thing I've ever done. Oh my god.
And it was so great because, you kind of forget the sound of their voice in a way.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was why I really wanted them. And I wanted her to do it before, like, I don't know what would happen to the VHS over time. Like, it probably just
Totally.
to start to disintegrate.
I
But I was like, I
know how
really want
reliable they are.
this. And
Yeah.
that was like one of my favorite things that I've done, because that's another thing, you don't think about those things when you're with the person. Like I take so
Right.
many more videos on my phone, and I think my friends and my family probably think I'm annoying, but
Yes.
we don't take videos anymore. But then when someone's gone, you don't hear their voice anymore, and that's
Right.
the way you can like resonate and
Mm.
reflect on it. And I just think it's really important.
That's so true. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. My That was the thing, and with my dad especially. I mean, now, God, I wish I'd taken so many more, but with my mom, like with the type of cancer that she had with esophageal cancer, like she midway through her journey had to get a tracheotomy, and like from that day on, I never heard her talk again. So I was like, oh my God, like what I wouldn't give, like, oh, I just, all those what ifs and I wish I had, whatever. But with my dad, when he was starting to go downhill, I was like, I have these like conversations recorded and all the things. And yeah, my husband's he's constantly like, you're taking too many pictures and videos and whatever. What do you need? I'm like, you don't understand. You haven't like lost two people very, very close to you. So it's, it's out of love. But
Yeah. No, I even started getting into like the reels. Like I'll go on, a weekend trip or a getaway, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make videos, and I make it into a reel. And like, yes,
oh,
that's a
that's
lot
so
of work,
smart.
but it's so fun to just like look at and,
Yeah.
remember those times. And back in the day, we used to lean on like VHS all the time, and that was always
Yeah.
around, but we just don't do that anymore. And I think that's like one thing that I miss, and like have the hardest time with, or just like those little moments and those little things that you didn't capture during the short time that you had with them.
Yeah, definitely. So you kind of actually touched on this a little bit, but are there any other like coping tools or pieces of guidance or anything like that that you would give grievers who are going through grief right now or experiencing like a recent loss and just kind of struggling with it? Or conversely, if you want to answer this question, like anybody who wants to support someone who's grieving, because it sounds like you have some amazing resources. And again, this will all be linked in the show notes. But if there's anything, any message or whatever that you might have to people who are trying to support a griever, either on either end.
Yeah. So I think going back to what I said earlier, that's like something that I do, whether, over the years it's been a breakup or through grief or starting a business or, difficult times within your job, is to just take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
I know, and everybody knows when you're in it, it feels like the grief will never let up, but
Right.
it does.
Yeah.
And, you'd go through this tunnel day by day. But eventually you do start to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
So it's just like really important, I think, to think about, what one thing can you do every day to move in the
Yeah.
right direction. And then the second is both for the person who's grieving and the people who want to support you through grieving. It's really important to lean on your community, whether
Yeah,
that be
that's
your
fair.
friends or your mentors. A lot of people keep to themselves during this time. I know
Mhm.
I'm one of them. And the people that are there for you, it really means a lot. And when you want to be there for someone, providing actionable support. So like
Yeah.
not saying like what can I do for you or I'm here for you if
Mhm.
you need anything, but being really specific and considerate about it. Like tonight I'd like to bring you dinner,
Yeah.
or like this weekend let's go get a coffee and walk around the farmers market or something like that, to get them out, to help them out in whatever way it is like you can, whether that's picking up groceries, making dinner, having them over for a wine night, something of the sort. But
Yeah.
just be really actionable and considered with it, because if you just say an open-ended comment,
Mhm.
I think they're probably not going to lean into that.
It's unlike, yeah, exactly. Well, I think too, like the thing with grief and like, especially like early, like acute grief is like, and this is actually to go back to what you're saying, which is perfect segue actually, as far as, in the early stages where there's a very short timeline, there's this laundry list of things you didn't even know were on there. Getting an urn is one of them, and all of these things. And you're not in a good mental space to make decisions, yet you have to. So for friends or family to then, I don't think maliciously pile on, but like if they're just like, oh yeah, you let me know, like kind of come to me when you're ready. Like I completely understand why people did that. And I think I probably was one of those people like back in the day before I had anything traumatic happen to me. But I love that idea of taking action and kind of almost giving them like a yes or no thing. Like if they're, because it kind of puts it back on them as just to be like, yep, I'm feeling this. Okay, I think I'm okay to go get a coffee. Yes, that's okay. Or,
Yeah,
you know what? No, I'm really not feeling it. Not like oh, get back to me whenever you're ready. And they're just like, I can barely make it to the mailbox right now. Okay. Like I can't even tell you when I'm going to be able to text you. So just sort of taking that pressure off, because it's like the last thing that a griever needs for sure.
totally. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can just be as supportive as you would to someone like during a breakup, because I feel like
Yeah. Great
those
point. I mean,
two
that's a
things,
loss. Sure.
the support that you need during both of those times is pretty similar. Like
Yeah.
you just want someone to take you out of that state and kind of remind you of like the normalcy that you used to
Yeah.
experience. And so, and people are so much more willing, post breakup to
Yes.
text you and invite you out. And it's not as,
Like, and maybe intimidating
taboo.
almost. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
To
It's like,
like,
and so just thinking of it in that form, like, what would you say to someone then? Because that
mhm.
pretty much translates, I would say, for the most part. That's how you can support someone, is really just showing up and providing just the bare necessities of
Absolutely.
entertainment and
Yeah.
companionship.
At least offering it and continuing to offer it too. Cause I definitely, I mean, I
Yeah.
know this because I went through it, but like, I think some grievers, like it might take them a while to like warm up to doing that. So, maybe not asking like ad nauseum, but like asking every so often and continuing to check in. And, it's almost like, it's like that thing where people are like, I don't want to go. I just want to know that I'm invited. It's like,
Yep.
but then eventually they might say yes. And that's, what we just have to keep like working towards. And it can take
Exactly.
a while sometimes. So if you're a griever, know that that is okay. It can take months to feel like you're there, but to challenge ourselves too, to get out and do those things. So, all right, perfect segue to the very last question I have for you. And you kind of answered this a little bit already, but if there's anything you want to add, what does finding gains from your losses mean to you?
I think it just means, finding the light at the end of the tunnel, and like
Mhm.
what that means, like how you can use such a negative in your life to become a positive.
Yeah.
And I think it's even an added bonus if that positive is something that continues that person's memory or the memories that you have with them. And like I said, Welkin's exactly that for me.
Yeah.
Welkin is my gain from my loss, and I was able to channel my grief into creating this business to help the future me's of the world. And I really love
Yeah.
it. And it's something I get to do every day. And so every day, part of me thinks about my dad, and I think how proud he would be. And
Mhm.
I just love that.
That's so amazing. Oh, such a gift. I love it. I love it so much. I love the urns. It's been so amazing connecting with you too. I'm excited to keep this going also. So just to close this out, where can people find you on social, your website, all the good things? And again, this will all be linked in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Welconmemorials.com, and Welcome Memorials is our Instagram handle as well. And be sure to
Awesome.
read the show notes, because you'll have a special treat for them in
Yes, I will definitely for
there.
sure. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Kate, for being here. I'm so glad to, give people more of the kind of girl behind the brand, if you will, and get to hear your story. And I think these stories like this are so important to hear and to just like plant those seeds of hope. That is what we're doing here on this podcast. So I'm really grateful for your time today. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thanks so much for hosting me. And for anybody listening, if you ever have any questions or any suggestions or anything you would like to see, you're welcome to email us at hello@welcommemorials.com. We would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah.